So I know some of you aren't really going to want to hear this, but I am one of those people that I really trust my instincts when it comes to a lot of things going on in the world. I usually will trust my instincts first, and then I'll look for evidence to either confirm or deny the instincts that I already have. And the reason I trust my instincts is that they come from somewhere. They're not just made up little fantasies. What happens with your gut instincts is essentially your brain, which is the best supercomputer in the history of the world, takes in a metric F ton of information every single second. 11 million pieces of information every single second come into our brain, and our brain processes them and tries to put them together and tries to find patterns and tries to find logic and tries to find order. But it does it on a deeply subconscious basis. So we are not always aware of all the things that our brain is up to. And then where our gut instincts come from is our brain takes all that information that exists in our brain that we're not consciously aware of, and it delivers us an answer. Boom. It just doesn't tell us how we got there. But I think if you're honest with yourself, you can pretty much assert that your gut instincts tend to be right. Think about a time for those of you who work in maybe traditional office environments where you walk into a room at work and before anyone has said anything, you know something is wrong. That's not based on evidence. That's not based on facts. That's not based on data. That is based on your gut instinct, your instant assessment of that situation. And it usually turns out to be right. It does. And so listen, one of the instincts that I've had lately is obviously, I believe Donald Trump won the election. I absolutely do. And I can watch days and days and days of hearings about all the evidence and all this and all that. And we're not going to go into that because I'm not allowed to talk about it on YouTube. But really, it was always more of an instinct for me, not only that he was going to win the election, but that I do still believe he did win the election, because I think people are over it. I think people are over the stuff coming from the left, the woke nonsense, and I really think that we're going to see a lot of people fighting back in 2021 because they are over it. And if you're truly over it, why would you vote for Joe Biden, where he's actively showing you every single day that he's only going to continue to perpetuate this craziness? He literally picked his VP based on perpetuating this craziness. Most of the people he's planning on appointing in his cabinet are perpetuating this craziness. Why would you vote for that if you're truly over it? So that's just my gut instinct. But now I'm looking for evidence. I'm looking for evidence that that's true. And when you start to look around, it's pretty easy to find evidence to support this. Listen, just yesterday, we saw that a mother became the first person that I know of anyway to actually sue her child's school because the school was forcing the child to take this woke nonsense class required for graduation, even after the mother tried to work with the school in a nice private way to get her child out of that class. The school said no, and it's required for graduation. If he doesn't take the class, he's not going to graduate. And so now the mother is suing the school, and the school, in typical school fashion, has retaliated against the kid, calling him a racist and suspending him. Welcome to America. So I really think that people are over it. And I think that here, this article we're going to look at right here is another example of people just being over it. Detroit is suing Black Lives Matter protesters for civil conspiracy. The city of Detroit is literally suing Black Lives Matter. I think we're going to see a lot of lawsuits in 2021. I got to start brushing up on my lawyerly knowledge. I've got to start watching. I'm already watching a whole bunch of lawyers on YouTube just to make sure I have some semblance of understanding this stuff. And I definitely recommend you do too, because I ain't a lawyer. I'm trying to do the best I can. So we're going to look at this article and we're going to just talk about what I think it means. But before we get into that, listen, folks, we're in the holiday season, and I just want to say that I so appreciate all the support that you all have given me over the past year. If I think back to January 2020, I never would have imagined being in the position that I am now, and I'm so grateful for all of you that have helped support the channel in the last year. I just can't say that enough. Now, if you're new to the channel, maybe you haven't subscribed yet, I do daily content around news, politics, culture, really focusing in on the culture war stuff lately, on the critical race theory, woke nonsense, all that stuff. I post almost every single day. I may take tomorrow off for Christmas. I haven't decided yet. But if you want to help support me into 2021, please consider subscribing to the channel, turning on notifications, giving this video a thumbs up. all that good stuff. It really does help me out, and I greatly appreciate it. All right, let's take a look at this article. And, this article is from The Intercept, which is incredibly biased. This is an incredibly biased publication. Glenn Greenwald, who is one of the founders of The Intercept, actually resigned a couple months ago because his editors were making him make changes to articles to take out any information that is critical of Joe Biden. And if you read this full article, I will link it in the description below. You will see they are incredibly biased in favor of the protesters in this article. So I just want you to keep that in mind as we take a look at what's going on. At the end of August, activists in Detroit, like those in dozens of U.S. cities, sued their local government for its police department's reaction to this year's Black Lives Matter mobilization. The complaint alleges that the Detroit cops repeatedly responded with violence when they took to the streets and includes photos and descriptions of some of the gruesome resulting injuries, bruised and broken ribs, concussions, a collapsed lung, a fractured pelvis. In light of this brutality, the protesters asked a federal judge to bar the police from using tools of excessive force like chemical weapons, sound cannons, and rubber bullets against them. Now, let's keep in mind that if you watch protest videos, and I've spent a lot of time watching protest videos, the police do not just roll up and start using these tools at their disposal to disperse the protesters. They don't just do that. There's usually some sort of standoff. There's usually announcements made that it's time to pack up and go home, children, before they start doing any of this stuff. So if you don't believe me, go watch protest videos, man. They're incredibly boring for hours, and then all of a sudden there's a little flurry of activity when the police do all this stuff after they've tried every other method to get the protesters to do what they want them to do. Less than a month later, after the court issued temporary orders restricting the cops' use of force, the city filed its official response. It includes a line-by-line denial of every brutality accusation and a countersuit. Detroit's demonstrators are part of a civil conspiracy, the city countersuit alleges, to disturb the peace, engage in disorderly conduct, incite riots, destroy public property, and resist police orders, among other illegal acts. That sounds pretty typical for Black Lives Matter, doesn't it? The countercomplaint asked the judge to issue judgments declaring that the protesters engaged in this conspiracy and defamed the mayor and police to award the city damages. Now, listen, I'm not going to get behind any lawsuits about defaming of the mayor. Like, that's a free speech issue, man. But in regards to inciting riots and destroying public property and inciting illegal acts and resisting police orders, oh, you bet your bottom dollar I'm in favor of them suing Black Lives Matter over that. And anyone who's watched the Black Lives Matter riots, I'm not even going to call them protests because they're usually not, they're riots. Anyone who's watched this stuff knows that that's exactly what they end up doing. They end up destroying stuff. There has been $2 billion in property damage at the hands of Black Lives Matter. The countersuit against Black Lives Matter protesters is a novel move in the post-George Floyd era, and it has lit a fire under already boiling local tensions. The city has tried to portray it as a routine legal act, but many see it as a counterattack, as an effort to suppress the right to protest, to shift the public narrative away from the police department's violence. Representative Rashida Tlaib, whose congressional district includes much of Detroit, has lambasted it as an unthinkable assault on constitutional rights. Well, Rashida, you gotta go read the First Amendment, honey, because here is what the First Amendment says. Here is the actual, just verbatim text of the First Amendment. Congress shall make no laws respecting an establishment of religion or prohibiting the free exercise thereof, or the abridging the freedom of speech or of the press, or of the right of the people to peaceably assemble and to petition the government for a redress of grievances. See, the part of the First Amendment that people who defend Black Lives Matter always leave out every single time is the part where they're supposed to peaceably assemble. Not set things on fire, not loot stores, not pull down statues, peaceably assemble. That's the part that always gets left out. These attacks against us are a way of attempting to minimize our ability to go on the offensive and call for transparency and accountability, because that's all they really want, right? Is transparency and accountability. That's why we're pulling down statues, says Tristan Taylor, a protest leader and plaintiff in the demonstrators' original lawsuit. This is just a way of saying to people, this is not a place where you can raise your voice. I don't know a single person on the right who actually has an issue with people peacefully protesting, showing up, doing a march, holding signs, doing speeches, making their voice known. Dude, you do that. You have my 100% support. You aren't screwing things up for other people. You aren't hurting other people. You aren't stealing other people's stuff. You aren't destroying other people's stuff. You're cool. That's not what the city is saying happened. In asserting a civil conspiracy, the city's countersuit also alleged that the protests in Detroit have repeatedly turned violent, endangering the lives of police and the public. And because of this, Detroit Will Breathe's demonstrations shouldn't be considered First Amendment protected activities, which I absolutely agree with. The city claims that during 4 protests, activists injured Detroit police officer by throwing objects at them and resisting arrest. An earlier court filing claims that the injuries include cracked vertebrae, lacerations, and concussions, but the documents provide no detail on how each injury occurred. The filings also repeatedly claim the protesters were destroying and defacing public property, but only give 2 examples. Okay, a police car window shattered on an unspecified date, and a statue of a slave owner spray painted in September. The countersuit's most detailed accusation of Detroit's Will Breathe unlawful behavior center on activists repeatedly ignoring police orders to disperse. So they're ignoring police orders to disperse, huh? Let's go back up to the top here and look at what the city of Detroit is originally alleging. Detroit's demonstrators are part of a civil conspiracy the city's countersuit alleges to disturb the peace, engage in disorderly conduct, incite riots, destroy public property, resist police orders, among other illegal acts. Would not dispersing be resisting police orders? Probably. It's also probably disturbing the peace. It's also probably engaging in disorderly conduct. I'm just saying, if we're acknowledging that they're not dispersing, because that was literally from the protest leader, right? If we're acknowledging that the activists repeatedly ignored police orders to disperse, then that to me seems like the city of Detroit's probably right. But of course, they don't see it that way. Detroit's Will Breathe complaint, by contrast, includes extensive details on the violent actions of Detroit police officers. One protester named in the suit claims that she was shot in the chest with a rubber bullet which pierced her skin and tissue after being tear gassed and beaten with a riot shield without provocation. The police never do that stuff without provocation, dude. Again, go back and watch protest videos. I do not believe for one red second that the police did that without provocation. So this article goes on for a little while, and remember, keep in mind, like I said, this is on The Intercept, so it's going to be a really biased view of this situation, but the overall point I want to make here is that they're suing Black Lives Matter. The city of Detroit is suing Black Lives Matter. So let's just keep an eye on it. Let's see where it goes. Who knows? But I doubt that this is the last of these types of lawsuits that we're going to see. I think we're going to see a lot of lawsuits from a lot of different places in 2021. All right, guys, that's all I have for right now. I'll see you soon.